Hey everybody, Bonehead for the Bonehead podcast and welcome to the monthly meta. This is our show where we get together and we have a look at two things in competitive Blood Bowl: what's legal and what's lethal. So the point of this is to bring you up to speed in the most recent releases from Blood Bowl, and if you're going to a tournament, if you're about to join a league, or if you're coming back to the game after foolishly playing something else, then you know exactly what you need to pay attention to. And the second thing is we have a look at the NAF results, so the tournament results for the last month, and we see which teams are performing well. Now this is the first show of the year for this, so I didn't do one at the beginning of January, but we'll be comparing January's results to the rankings of the whole of 2025. So if a team is overperforming compared to how it was last year, that's how you'll know which team is on the rise and which team is on the decline. All right, so let's have a look at what's legal in Blood Bowl. So February 2025, what's new? So the first thing we have to talk about is the fact that there was no FAQ in November. We normally get in May and November an FAQ where they cover just some minutiae of rules. Normally, there's a bit of a wild card where something gets changed, and that can be a rule, that can be a nerfing of something, that can be a boosting of something else. We've seen historically star players and tiers like change values and change rankings. It's been a bit quiet on the FAQ front this year, and I tell you what, it was the most quiet it's ever been for the November FAQ because there wasn't one. It just never appeared, which has got the rumour engines absolutely brewing. The biggest question is, right, we had Blood Bowl 2016, we had Blood Bowl 2020, we didn't have Blood Bowl 2024, but there's not been an FAQ. Does this mean that there should have been a new Blood Bowl out in 2024 and that we are pending release for it? Seems like a stretch if you ask me, but I like to be optimistic, and hey, more Blood Bowl is more better. So yeah, the first thing to mention, there wasn't an FAQ. The second thing that we had that was released is the Chaos Dwarf team. Now, we've played these guys to death on the channel, so if you want to see anything about the Dwarf team, we've got it covered, whether it's team rosters, whether it's how they play in 7s, how they play in 11s, we've got it covered. In fact, thank you, Airbrush. These guys are going to be coming back for the next Bonehead Championship kicking off in the next couple of weeks as well. The same team out of 7s, so your favourite players will be returning to play in 11. So yeah, we had another Chaos Dwarf team, we had another Blood Bowl team. So we had Chaos Dwarfs drop. We've had Gnomes this year, last year, and we've had Chaos Dwarfs. So actually we're back to the point where we're getting maybe 2 teams a year. There was a dearth, there was a gap in the Blood Bowl releases where we just had, I think, Vampires for a year. Now, I know that Games Workshop had a load of like distribution issues because we had the issues that, you know, with the old world and everything, where they're like, we just can't make and we just can't bring the stuff out. So it would not be unrealistic to say, okay, there was that gap with Vampires, and I wonder if they're 6 months behind, and I wonder if it should have been Vampires and Gnomes 1 year and then Chorfs and the new game potentially last year. So if you are subscribing to that rumor, hey, could be early this spring. If not, there's still a couple of teams of legends that Games Workshop needs to pick up. They need to pick up High Elves, and oh, that looks super retro when it's blurred. My painting is rubbish. High Elves and what's the other team of legend? They're Tomb Kings, right? Those are the two teams that are still pending a re-release. So we might see them. We might see a new edition. We don't know, but there was no FAQ, but we did get 2 teams. So Chaos Dwarves have come out, and there's a few stars in there. I don't think anything too groundbreaking. You had Zarg Mad-Eye, the guy with the blunderbuss. He's a Chaos Dwarf that shoots things. You had Rashnak Backstabber, who is a hobgoblin that stabs things, and you've had Hthark, who is a pretty good big guy, but very, very, very expensive. We also had a couple of stars drop in the Almanac. So there was an Almanac that came out this year that had Gnomes and Vampires and Chaos Dwarves in. So if you picked up those spikes, that's all in there as well, alongside the rules for 2 new star players, Maple Highgrove, a strength 5 movement 3 treeman that can block at range, which is quite interesting, and Glimmer Shard something or other, who is a little spite that can fly around and stab. Interesting stars. We've not seen the models for them yet, but I know that at least one of them is being run at a tournament this weekend, the one we're running, so at Beachhead. In fact, this video will come out after that tournament, so hey, listen to the podcast, we can talk about how Maple Highgrove played. So we've had some stuff happen in Blood Bowl over the last 6 months. the Gnome team, then the Chaos Dwarf team, and a couple more stars in the Almanac. Actually, it's been quite interesting. The lack of the FAQ really brings up the question of what's next. All right, so moving on from what's happened to if you're getting back into the game, if you're going to start going to tournaments, if you're joining a league, what do you need to know? So the core rules for Blood Bowl. You need the rulebook, then you need the FAQ document. So we didn't have one in November, but the document is still there available for download. It's getting a bit chunky now. It's worth looking at. If you're just playing casually, don't worry about it too much. If you're playing at a league, if you're playing in a tournament, definitely have a flick through, but it's very good as reference rather than anything majorly game breaking, I think. So we had an almanac in 2021, we had an almanac in 2022, we had an almanac in 2025. Basically, and generally speaking, they all include the stuff that was in Spike magazines and some star player rules. So the most recent one's got some extra league rules, and there's bits scattered around, but if you are playing in a tournament, the things you need to know are your team's rules and star player rules if you're using them for your team. Those are available in the box. So if you pick up a Gnome team, if you pick up a Chaos Dwarf team or a Norse team or whatever, if you go when they release Maple Highgrove and you go and buy the Maple Highgrove, the rules are all in the boxes for those. They're scattered around the Spike magazines and stuff like that, but they are basically available when you buy the product, or go to Tourplay or come to us, because the rules are all there. It's such an easy game to get into, but you will need the rulebook and you need to be aware of the FAQ and the rules that you are playing with for your team. And those rules can be found in the box, but also I love the Spike magazines. So these are brilliant little books. They're about 30 pages, and you get art, you get stories, you get the rules for your team, their star players, some setups and things. They're really good. They're very cheap as far as Games Workshop goes. And this is the list of Spike magazines that we've got at the moment. Chaos Dwarfs has just dropped, Gnomes, Amazons, Norse. I've missed Vampires. That's just wrong, isn't it? I've missed Vampires out completely. Ignore that graphic, but you can pick up your Spike magazine to go alongside your team. There's also the Team of Legend PDF available on the Games Workshop website. If you go to the Games Workshop website, you click downloads. There you will find rules for the last 2 remaining Teams of Legend. I muffed it earlier, but it's High Elves, who are basically just more armoured Elven Union. I know that's going to upset some High Elf players. And you've got what I think is just one of the most interesting teams floating around, and I cannot believe they've not remade them yet, which is the Tomb Kings, the Khemri team. You've got 4 strength 5 big guys and a whole team of Edge 4+. It's a really unique challenge, some really cool positionals, and I'm very interested to see what they do with them. Norse, we saw them add the Beerbor. Chaos Dwarves, we've seen them add the Flamesmith and the Shanker. Gnomes, we saw them add the entire team. Amazon's got a bit of a they've done a really good job of being creative with the teams. So you've got High Elves that are kind of just a tougher version of Elven Union, and you've got Tomb Kings that are very, very, very unique. I cannot wait to see what they do to those 2 teams. But if you want to run them as they are right now, there's a PDF available for the download on the Games Workshop website. The only other team I'm going to mention here is a team called Slann, which is Space Frogs, and the NAF to have the rules for those, but I think we're going to see them retired at some point. All right, so that's everything for core Blood Bowl. If you're joining a league, if you're going to games, a tournament or something like that, that's what you need to know. You need the rule book, you need to know where the FAQ is, and you need the rules for your team and any star players you're running. That's it. But it's Blood Bowl. There's tons of extra, and this is my favourite list. Okay, so the Death Zone was out in 2021, all those years ago, and it's got rules for everything. It's got rules for sevens, it's got wizards and giants and all kinds of cool stuff you can add to Blood Bowl. Then you've got Dungeon Bowl and Gutter Bowl, which are 2 different ways to play. Dungeon Bowl is just Blood Bowl in a dungeon with treasure chests and teleporters. I love Dungeon Bowl. You've also got college teams in there, so 8 new teams for Blood Bowl that can only be played in Dungeon Bowl, and they're mixed teams, and it's just wicked. Then you've got Gutter Bowl, which is sevens, played on the size of a standard Blood Bowl pitch, but there's like holes you fall in, there's market stalls you can run through. It's a cool characterful extra way to play. It's quite violent because the ground In some places, it's genuinely lava. Then you've got the special play cards, you've got special rules for pitches, you've got the rules for referees. There's a ton of extra stuff for Blood Bowl if you want it. And if you want to play Blood Bowl, the best way is on the tabletop. But if you don't have a chance to go play tabletop, there's a couple of other great ways to play the game as it is now. So Fumble is the board game. It is the full game, but the graphics are very much akin to something that you would see on the Game Boy Color. Now, if you're as old as I am, that sounds awesome, and it is awesome, and Fumble is a ton of fun. It has the full range of Blood Bowl, the full depth of Blood Bowl, but none of the cool, I don't know, I like the way it looks, but it's not got the shiny graphics that the next thing on the list does have, which is Blood Bowl 3. And I put 3 asterisks on there. It is now playable. Blood Bowl 3 works for the most part. The difficulty with Blood Bowl 3 is there's only half the teams available, and it creates a bit of a gnarly meta. So Blood Bowl 3 is similar to Blood Bowl, but it is just its own mini meta that we're not going to touch for today, but it is, hey, it's a great way to play more Blood Bowl. If you want to play a game of Blood Bowl, you can jump on there. There's tons of stuff you can do. So Blood Bowl 3. Classic Blood Bowl rules. Blood Bowl 2 is still floating around as well. So if you want to play with lots of teams with the current rules, you go to Fumble. If you want to play with a few teams with the current rules, you go to Blood Bowl 3. If you want to play with a lot of teams in the old rules, you go to Blood Bowl 2. All right, so that's everything that's legal. Let's talk everything that's lethal. So like I said at the top of the video, this is data compiled from the last month's worth of NAF results. So everything that happened in January. If you went to a NAF tournament, then the results will be in here, and we will be using uppy downies to say how well the team is performing, and the benchmark is all of last year. So if all of last year all added together, this team was the most winningest, but in January it's 3rd place, it would have dropped 2 places. For example, we're going to have a look at all the teams in Blood Bowl and where they're ranked in the top 30, and we're also going to have a look at the top most popular teams as well, so that you can kind of look at who's winning and who's most likely to be there, which I think is actually quite useful. Anyway, let's go to this screen and let's bring up the top. It is actually 30 teams now, isn't it? All right, 21 to 30. Whoa, there we go. Okay, fixed. Magnificent. Fully prepped this. At number 30, we've got Goblins, who were the worst all last year and remain the worst at a shocking win percentage of 32%. Goblins are having a tough time in Blood Bowl, and they have access to all kinds of things, and it's just really, really tough to be a Goblin player. They are a ton of fun. They do brilliantly in leagues. They're really fun to get in leagues, but when it comes to tournaments, there's tax on star players now, and Goblins as a core team are quite expensive. So if you want to have everything for Goblins, you can have everything for Goblins, but you can't really afford the game-changing star players at the same time, which is really hurting them a bit. Gnomes have dropped 2 spaces and are 39% at 29th place. Snotlings this month are 28th. They have dropped 6 places from last year. Up 1 place, we've got Ogres. So here we go. You've got a lineup here of 3 of the 4 tier 3 teams. 4 of the 5, sorry. Old school, right? Stunty teams are actually at the bottom, which is not unsurprising. It's where they should have historically been, but there's just been so much power added with the star players that they've tended to do better, particularly with Snotlings, as they're cheap as heck. But we're seeing now in tournament rule sets like a hardcore ban on stuff like Morg or Hack Phlegm, or just a way that they cannot take them together. So when it comes to Snotlings, they've been powered down a little bit. It's not unsurprising, but still at 44%, they're sitting slightly outside the Goldilocks zone of 45 to 55%, right? So they're not doing too bad. Ogres are solid, but again, similar to Goblins, they can't always afford to take special stuff on top of a standard roster. All of those teams are a load of fun in League, however. Right. As we enter the Goldilocks zone, Nurgle are down 1 spot, 45%. Khorne down 2 spots at 46%. Also at 46%, we've got Chorfs and Slann. So we're going to ignore Slann for the time being, but we're going to talk about Chorfs. So we are seeing the first results here for the new Chaos Dwarf team, which is interesting. And it's always, you always have to take the first period of results with a new team with a pinch of salt. You will get a load of players, pick them up that have never run them before. You use tournaments as a great opportunity to get to grips with the team. I think that that is personally a brilliant way to get to grips with a team. I always say this, you know, take it to a tournament or a game day, get 3 games in, you spend a Saturday playing Chaos Dwarves, you will know at the end of it whether you like them or not. So we're going to see a lot of that, and that's going to continue. Them dropping 10 places, I'm still seeing at 46%. I'm not quite willing to say that's entirely the roster changes, but it would be ridiculous of me to say that the roster is not slightly weaker. Slightly to medium amounts weaker, depending on whether you're as serious about it as Blood Tithe or not. Slann dropping 11 places. I mean, they only ran 170 games in January. I don't think there's really much we need to read into that one. Right, moving up 4 spaces for our last stunty team is Halflings. They're at 47% win rate, so a couple of percentage better than any of the other stunty teams. They still tend to be able to get your star players in there. Griff is a bit of a problem because he's a megastar, but you've got Carla, you've got now Rodney. There's a ton of cool stuff you can do with Halflings, and they are cheap as you like, but more resilient than Snotlings. So it's an interesting roster. And then the last of the bottom third, we've got Imperial Nobility, down a couple of spots, sitting at 48% win rate. That's not bad. All right, into the mid zone here at 20, up 1 spot, we've got Norse. So I think Norse are starting to stabilize. So they finished the end of the year at 21st place, I think, if you look at last year's results together. Norse used to be kind of top 10, top 15 here, so they've plateaued a little bit. I don't think it's anything to worry about. They're still a very, very competitive roster, as you will have seen if you've been following any of our series. Black Orcs having a great January. Love this. I'm a huge Black Orc fan. I know Skaven is my main, but Black Orcs is my sneaky guilty secret. Up 10 spots, 48% win rate. Sitting at 49, we've got Chaos up a bit, and Skaven, what are you doing? Dropping 8 spots out of the top 10. So Skaven finished in 2025 in the top 10 of teams, as they should be, because Skaven are superior, right? 4 gutter runners, you cannot beat it. You can't beat it. I'm sorry. If you think you can, leave, because gutter runners are fantastic. So them having a bad January is not something I like to see, but it's reasonable, I suppose. Peak and trough. Up a few spots, we've got Lizards, bang on 50%. Also at 50% are Orcs. Orcs are underrated. Okay, they're in the top half of the table. They are the top of tier 2, bottom tier 1. Everyone thinks Orcs should be back into tier 1 because they are just well hard. Million build, you get everything you want for Orcs, and then it's just skills, and a couple of rerolls or apothecaries or whatever, but they're so tough they don't need it. They come with a lot of strength and a lot of skills already. When it comes to Orcs, they're just very, very good. So I love to see Orcs perform, and that's wicked to see. Down 12 spots compared to last year is Amazons, which is remarkable when you consider that their win percentage is still 51%. So Zons have landed in this edition. They are more interesting than their last iteration. They're slightly better, I would say. But yeah, sure, you don't have block kicking around anymore, but that strength 4 bit is just very, very lovely when it comes to this team. Nice to see them. Up 5 spots, you've got Dwarves. Up 3 spots, you've got Humans. And down 3 spots, you've got High Elves. Interestingly about High Elves, it's the first one of our teams of legend. They have been doing very well this entire format. It's a very solid roster, and that's why I'm so excited to see what Games Workshop are going to do when it comes to them updating them for Team of Legend, because they're performing really well at the moment. They've performed really well this entire time. The only difficulty with High Elves, when you come to kind of reading the data here, is their games are consistently super low, because this is the last time, I think, Games Workshop released a High Elf team. This is 1994, so when it comes to running High Elves, it's not as easy to get into as some of the other teams. And then we come to the top 10 for January in Blood Bowl. At number 10, staying exactly where they belong, you've got Necromantic. Tell you what, let's put this up on the screen. Necromantic at the 52% win rate, still well inside the Goldilocks zone. The numbers here are pretty tasty. You've got OWA dropping 3 spots, but still at 52% win rate. OWA are a really interesting team. They come alive in tournaments because you get more gold and you can just not buy some of the stuff you end up with. OWA and Imperial Nobility are really interesting like this. You need like 1100, 1150 to be able to buy all the stuff you want to buy. OWA are just such an interesting challenge. We've seen them on the channel, right? They are a lot of fun, and when they start to gel, they really start to cook. You leave out a couple of the dwarves, you focus on running them as a better version of a human team, you can kind of compensate for some of the loner, and it starts to really, really work. The only other thing is that they are quite low on the played games. So you've got this kind of thing where High Elves, not a lot of games being played. OWA, not a lot of games being played, but generally speaking, the people who play them know how to play them, so know how to leverage the advantages. Down 7 spots, which might be the lowest we've ever seen this team. It's Underworld. Underworld have historically been the big bad team for 2020 Blood Bowl. I mean, there's Skaven and Goblins. Like, how can you cheer against that? 53% win rate is probably the lowest they've been. They're just good. They're just great. They don't need a lot of money to get cooking. If you give them a lot more money, they get stars and they just cook even more. So Underworld are really solid. Up 4 spots, you've got Undead at 53%, which is really good for Undead. Undead, again, you've got Underworld and Undead, who are both classic tier 1 teams. They don't need a lot to get cooking. And when you add more stuff, tournaments, team value, the lowest you're looking is 1.1 plus skills. Goes up to 1.25 with skills. So you're looking at basically a team that represents the first year of league. That's where the tier 1 teams tend to do really well. As you'll see from the next two, sitting at 54%, you've got Dark Elves and Wood Elves. So Wood Elves have not been overly successful this edition. Over the last year, however, they've been brought back up, and that's where you're seeing star player tax tick in. And you're seeing rule sets get a little bit tighter, a little bit more focused around running the team plus skills. Dark Elves and Wood Elves start to come alive when you focus on the team and add skills. They don't need a huge amount, but when it comes to Wood Elves, what they do need is a bit extra, either on the money front or the survivability front, right? Dark Elves don't need a lot, but if you are moving into an era of tournaments where there's less star player shenanigans and the builds are more focused around running more of your team, Wood Elves and Dark Elves do tend to do quite nicely. Down 1 spot, but still in the top 5, we've got Vampires. So I love to see this. We've only got 1 vampire team coming to Beachhead, which is quite interesting, but we've seen Vampires go boom when it comes to popularity. They have had a level up, but they take a little bit of skill to play. So I love to see Vampires doing so well. They are a tier 2 team. When they landed, Ben worried they might have been a bit overpowered. I wouldn't say that was the case, but they have done very, very well. And I think it's the classic team. They sit there with High Elves, with OWA as like a player that can run them, can do so very well. All right, next up, we've got Chaos Renegades having a massive January, 55%, sitting just on the inside, just on the top edge of the Goldilocks line. So they had a monstrous month. I think they were sitting at, what, 17, sort of the mid-realm for 2025. I love this. I got nothing to say. I don't really understand how they've done it, but I really love that they have. So 55%, they've played 261 games, so they've won like 150 games. That's fantastic to see. Then you've got a really interesting duo at the top. Whoa, number one. Number one is Elven Union for January. So the best team in Blood Bowl for January, Elven Union. So this is up 6 spots. So Elven Union over the course of this edition have kind of fluttered around 13, 14. Like they've kind of gone 8 to 18. That's kind of where they've stayed. But again, what we're seeing with the tournament builds being more focused on the team, Elven Union can overcome their inadequacies by having a little bit more money and a little bit more resilience. And if you get into the realm where you can start stacking skills, Elven Union can start to be very, very potent. And Tomb Kings have performed brilliantly for this entire edition. Like, they've done brilliantly. Again, it's one of those teams that if you know how to pilot them, you can run them really, really, really well. They are super consistent. I love Tomb Kings. I love playing against them with Skaven because that's kind of like a really bad matchup. So that's like a 3-4 touchdowns. Thank you very much. But I love to see TK do so well. And the fact they ran nearly 400 games in January, I think, is a testament to the third-party market for Blood Bowl. All right, so those are the teams that are performing the best in Blood Bowl. We're now going to have a look at the top 10 teams from a popularity point. So in January, which teams will run the most? So if you are going to a tournament, this could give you some guidance on which teams you're going to see. Down 3 spots compared to 2025, Amazons with 509 games, Norse and Dark Elf sticking around, still inside the top 10. So all of these teams are popular throughout 2024, and now heading into 2025, they're staying there. Up a few spots, but still in the top 10 are human teams. Then you've got Skaven and Undead, both dropping a couple of points there, but well inside 600 games. Lizards climbing, Vampires climbing a lot. So both those teams on the way to 700. and the top two have completely stayed the same. Somehow, in just January alone, nearly 800 games have been played with Orcs, and Necromantic basically 700. So if you are going to a tournament, each rule set affects it. That's the beautiful thing about Blood Bowl. You can read the meta, you can go, ooh, this rule set really encourages bash, so how do I lean into that? Do I go claw heavy? This tool set is good for dark elves and elves, so do I take an extra bit of tackle? That's the fun bit about tournaments. That's the fun bit about rule sets. Orcs, Necro, Vampire, Lizards, Undead, Skaven, Human, Dark Elves, Norse, Amazons, all super popular throughout January. So it's the rosters that you see kind of consistent. They don't need a huge amount, but that just, I think, echoes where our tournament rule sets are for Blood Bowl at the moment. They are all about coming back into consistency, and these teams here thrive in a consistent environment. They're easy to play in that environment as well, so you get like the players who are comfortable running them, and then you've got the players who are coming back or starting with Blood Bowl, actually able to take them and know exactly what they're doing. All right, so that is the monthly meta for the first part of 2025. Orcs, very popular. Elven Union, very winning. So actually it's really cool to see, and I'm very much looking forward to this year in Blood Bowl. I want to see more teams arrive from Games Workshop, or I want to see if the reason they didn't bring the FAQ is because we're going to get a new edition, because a new edition would be very interesting. Blood Bowl is in a brilliant space right now. There are tons of tournaments you can go to. There's tons of variety. There are tons of miniatures you can buy and rosters you can build. This is one of the best times to get into Blood Bowl, and we are here for it, because more Blood Bowl is more better. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you very much for joining me. We'll be back soon with more Blood Bowl content. Happy blocking.